much for coming on to the show to talk to me today. Could you take a minute to introduce yourself and tell me about the work that you do?
Hey, John, thanks for having me. Like you said, my name is Kirt Morris. I'm a cisgendered black male of Caribbean descent. My pronouns are he, him. I am the former Chief Diversity Officer for Merkle. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you today on the show.
All right. So tell me your formal title again, Chief Diversity Officer, is that what you said?
Yes. So my former title was the Global Chief Diversity Officer for Merkle, which is a marketing technology company that's based in Maryland.
Okay. When we think about diversity and all the challenges that are hit in the workplace, the like meritocracy is assumed, right? We're always
Right.
looking for the best option and making sure that folks have opportunities to really be innovative and to share a different approach to thinking. In this environment today, what are the challenges you think that we're faced with that hamper that kind of innovative thought, that challenge to the status quo?
Yeah. I think one of the things that's hampering the work and the passion that we both have for diversity, equity, and inclusion work is really truth, right?
Hmm.
We have a discourse within the spaces, corporate spaces and public spaces around what the truth is. And the truth is there is a group of individuals within the corporate space and the public space that have been historically disadvantaged, right? And the thinking behind, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work is to make sure that we could bring everyone along, right? But also realizing that there's some groups, right? If you're differently able, for example,
Hmm.
have had a hard time with that in the past. So I think the the crux of the issue is like what is truth, right? And the advent of alternative facts, right? So I think that's what's kind of ailing us in this space today.
Yeah, it's troubling to me that is the reality of the situation, is that it's
Right.
really even hard to agree on truth, and that everybody is really driven by like high emotions and very powerful ones.
Yeah.
What role do you feel that companies should play in equipping their employees with the tools to navigate these highly emotional
Yeah.
and ambiguous kind of
Right. Right.
environments that we're in at work today?
Yeah, so I think about companies as being corporate citizens, right, of the
Okay.
spaces that they occupy, and companies are in service not only of to their employees but to their customers and to their clients, right? So if you're B2B, so business to business, or B2C, business to consumer company, you're really selling ideas and goods and services to the public, right? And as such, you should be aware of who you're serving, right? So for
Hmm.
example, if you're in a retail space, right, and your clientele are kids or people of a certain age, you should understand what makes them think, like what drives them to come to either your brick and mortar site or
Hmm.
to your website, and understand what values they hold and try to mimic those values as best as you can, right? And when I say mimic, not to be performative about those values, but what are some of your core corporate values? Respect, inclusion, etc. Because I think as 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 we have seen in the past, consumers are willing to buy goods and services and from companies that have demonstrated similar values to those corporations, right? So I think it's very important that you have clear corporate values, not only in your mission statement, because those are words written either on a
Hmm.
piece of paper or on a corporate site, but how you show up for those values in real life.
So in my experience, I've seen a lot of really great values and mission statements.
Right.
And I understand that, companies are trying to attract talent. They're trying to attract talent that will lead to innovative solutions for the future. I've seen an executive level that is usually well versed in talking about those values.
Yeah.
And they probably have very good relationship skills. So when you are talking to a C-level executive at a company, it's you're steeped in those values, and that mission is constantly being connected. And then when you go down to the next level, and that
Yeah.
middle management level, in my experience, we've under-equipped middle management with the emotion skills to perform the work that is high in
Right.
emotional labor. And
Right.
we may not have equipped them with everything they need to understand how that value is the stated values of the company is theirs to also implement and create that culture that the company is espousing to do. Have you seen things start to fall apart at that middle management level as well?
Absolutely right. So that's where the rubber meets the road, for
Sure.
example, right? Because as an executive, you could say, hey, we believe that these behaviors are equal to the corporate culture of the company, right? But if your middle level managers are not given the time or the tools or the tactics to embody those values that I've spoken up on high, right?
Hmm.
You will find that those values are either lost in translation or they are not adhered to, right? So I think two things that we could do to help middle level managers make sure that they espouse like the corporate values is time and money, right? So give them time within their workday, within their work schedule to learn about those values and share those values with the next level down. And also, if there's any money available within the budgets of the company, how do you create programs or processes to make sure that those values are instilled in the workforce, right? So, I used to have a saying, behaviors are equal to culture, and culture is equal to behaviors, right? So, if you don't have those behaviors that are being instilled and actually practiced, it's very difficult to take those values from the executive level and also bring it down to the mid-level manager level. But also, right, culture starts from the is also top down, but culture is also bottom up as well, right? So you can't have culture if it's being, you know, ex- espoused from the executive level only. It has to start at the grassroots as well, and that's why sometimes it's very beneficial to have employee resource groups or business resource groups to help
Hmm.
create that culture within the walls of the company.
Yeah, and if we're doing it right, then we create a spot where people feel empowered to say, hey, here's something that's not aligned, with the
Right,
values that we say. But
right,
oftentimes we miss that mark, and
right.
it
Exactly.
creates that frustration, and then people don't speak
Right,
up, or they don't see that they're valued in the way that they're supposed to be, and that creates a lot of the frustration where we see people pull back, or quiet quit or quiet crack now, I think
right, 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 right,
is
right,
the
right.
new term.
Right. And to your point, John, right, it's also important that managers or everyone within the walls of the company behave in such a way that's reflective of their values, right? So you could have, like you said, values written on paper, but if
Hmm.
the behaviors are not reflective of those values, then there's issues that you're going to encounter with bad behavior, etc.
Right, right. Okay. All right. So these are, potentially high stakes interactions that people have with their managers. Middle managers tend to be having shrinking teams. Their roles are becoming, less and less as well. Artificial intelligence is coming up. Everything
Yep.
seems high stakes, and when you add pressure and
Yep.
time sensitivity to it, people often fall back on, everything that
Right.
past
Yeah.
behaviors rather than lean into new ones.
Yep.
I'd also say that when we work with people, there's not a lot of room to get it wrong. I feel like there's pressure to be perfect with this. Like, you take a class that talks about, the values or the culture, or, the way that we want to operate, and it's almost like if you take this class, then you're expected to be able to change your behavior, be good
Right.
at it, and continue on to be productive and work. Um, again, what I've seen is there's this resistance to getting it wrong, right? It's like if I make
Yeah.
a mistake, you said you were from the Caribbean, right? If there was
Yep.
something that maybe I said or did that could be interpreted as offensive to you,
Right,
you
right,
cared enough to show me grace and educate me.
right.
Great. But if there were power dynamics where you didn't know how I would react or whatnot, like how do you, when it's sensitive and scary to make a mistake, because people get canceled when they, you know,
Right,
they make a
right.
mistake and everybody
Yeah,
says you should have known better.
yeah.
But that's how humans learn. How do we create a space where people can learn and actually build relationships in these tense kind of changing times?
Yeah, so I go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Okay.
Which is the first one is around psychological safety. Like you have to feel comfortable voicing your opinion, right? In a way that's not detrimental to either your job or your physical safety, right?
Right, right.
So one of the things I've always told my teams is you need to give people grace, right? I would assume good intent, right?
Hmm.
And then have a deep conversation about, okay, what did you hear, right? Versus what, so it's almost like you're checking for understanding, saying, hey, I heard you say XYZ. Did you mean it that way, right? And having a really detailed conversation. And I think it's also critical and crucial when you have that conversation, right? You want to pull the person aside in a private space to have that conversation, right? Because he or she may be, embarrassed that they said something, and having that conversation in a public space amongst other employees is probably not the right thing to do. Having a deep conversation. Now, at the end of that conversation, you may still disagree with the point or the opinion or the fact that that
Mm.
person said, but at least you've had a constructive conversation around, hey, I am checking for understanding. Did you mean it this way? And I think also at the end of the day, giving each other grace to be wrong is so important, right? Because we all cannot be right all the time.
Right. Back to what you said at the beginning, like
Right,
it's like we could both think we're right and have to figure out how to work with that because sometimes you
right,
can't convince or change someone's
right,
mind. You just focus on that.
right,
Um,
right, exactly.
so giving grace is definitely an important piece. What about the you know, the resources and the education piece? I feel like you said if time and money were,
Yeah,
given, are there
yeah,
tools that you think would be, the best place to start when you're an emerging leader
yeah,
and you have a team full of people that are diverse in many ways, age, gender, cultural
yeah.
backgrounds. Um, what are the skills you think, or the courses or the areas that they would be best off to develop first?
Yeah, I think as a leader, you need two key skills, or these are two key skills that I have employed during my tenure, my working tenure. Um, I ask more questions than I make actual statements, right? So, and you're listening for the responses to those questions, right? So, being a leader that you're listening and you're asking more questions than making statements, I think that's very very helpful. But also coaching your team in a way that is constructive, right? So it's think about it as a referee in an NFL game, right? They blow the whistle immediately when they see an infringement on the field, right? Same concept applies in the workforce. When you see something that isn't right, you should talk to that employee immediately, right? Don't let it go a week, a month, right? Because then you'll probably forget the context in which that actual action took place. So in my opinion, listening and asking more questions than you're making statements. And also, secondly, making sure you address any items as quickly as you can in a private space.
Right. And I think that private space thing is, you've mentioned it a couple times here, but that's so important because, we're social creatures,
Right,
and
right.
status is really important to some. And if you are in a leadership role and somebody is trying to give you feedback, if you don't know the person well, have already established that bond, that could be really you perceived as a threat of sorts, right? And you
Right, right,
come out in
right,
front of people. So I really like that, maybe press pause. It also gives people time to maybe get their brains more regulated,
right,
and you're out of the situation. So maybe there was a pressure to get everything right because
right.
all of these people are in front of me right now. But 5 minutes after the meeting, when everyone has left, there might be another opportunity to really connect after those pressures are removed.
Yeah, and as a human being, so you want time to kind of reflect, right, prior to responding as well, right? You want to say, hey, I just heard this. Maybe I am incorrect, maybe I'm correct, but let me figure out, okay, how am I going to approach the individual? And then you have a more, in my opinion, a more constructive conversation when you're able to like have a kind of calm demeanor around, addressing some of those questions.
I I work with a lot of emerging leaders, and a lot of them struggle with confidence in
Mm.
a lot of ways. And there's this feeling of just kind of sometimes faking it until you make it,
Right, right.
which can work, but that it could also really backfire, or could then create feelings of imposterism. Like if you're faking it,
Right,
you
right,
are actually being a little bit of a fake.
right.
So what would you say to emerging leaders, right? That you know they make a misstep, right? And hopefully they have someone who's willing to
Yeah.
tactfully give grace, pull them aside, and share their perspective, and try to get to the bottom of it. Are there any things that you would encourage a leader to do when they realize they've misstepped, or they've gotten feedback that they had no idea until that point was something that could have been taken in a negative way?
Yeah, so you talk about imposter syndrome, and I know I had that early on when I first started in my role, right?
It's
I think
everywhere.
I
Yeah.
think we all have it in some way. But one thing that I had to do was I had to realize within my own self that I was enough, right? Now,
Mm,
and there were things that I didn't know that I had to go learn, right? So once you understand like what your gaps are, it's upon you then to say, hey, I need to remediate these gaps as best as I can, either personally or get people on your team that could fill those gaps for you. The first thing you have to do also is acknowledge, right? So you're saying, hey, you made a misstep. So you need to acknowledge within your own self, hey, I made a misstep, right? And that takes a lot of courage sometimes because no one wants to be incorrect or wrong or be perceived as not knowing the right answer.
yeah.
But we are not all knowing, right? So acknowledging that, hey, I made a misstep or I don't have the answer is the first step in seeking help, right? Or in seeking advice. So I think those two things, acknowledging, right? And then making sure that, hey, you are enough, but you're also going to have some gaps that you need to either remediate on your own or get help from a team member or a peer.
Yeah, the that first one, you said it so easily, to just kind of like accept that you are enough. It
Yeah, and I said it easily because because it takes work, right? Because
takes a lot of work.
yeah, it takes a lot of work. So I remember getting executive coaching for almost 3 months to kind of
Mm.
mentally wrap my head around like the new space I was in, right? I went from a senior director to leading or trying to build a global team of DEI professionals, and in this spaces with individuals that I had admired for my decade long plus career at my previous company, and then realizing, hey, like I was enough, right? Maybe I had different skills, like from my cultural background, right? I
Sure.
had different skills, and I think we have to realize that the person next to you, they have a unique set of skills that makes them unique for that role, and so do you, right? Now those two things may not match, like my skill and your skill may not match, but as a collective team, the hope is that those two things will actually come together nicely, as a jigsaw puzzle.
And complement each other even, right?
Right, exactly, exactly, right. And no one, like I said before, no one knows everything, and you have to realize as a leader, having that grace, having that ability to have that awareness that you don't know everything. You have to rely on your team. You have to learn from others around you,
Hmm.
and hopefully that makes you a stronger leader, and also it creates, in my opinion, psychological safety within the team, because the team will then see that, hey, as a leader, he or she doesn't know everything, but they're willing to come out and say in front of the team, like, I don't know, but also asking for help. I think what I've seen most leaders actually struggle with is that ability to ask for help.
Yeah, I just, growing up in the United States
Yeah.
as a male, cisgender male, the pressure to not appear weak or
Yeah.
vulnerable,
Yeah.
you don't, there's a lot. I mean, men
Yeah.
are under a lot of pressure to do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we say, there's been a lot of work and talk around, the power. Dr. Brene Brown, she like the
Yeah.
power of vulnerability got a lot of traction, and we
Yeah.
speak that. But it is really hard to do if you don't already have that confidence. Again,
Yeah.
I do a lot of executive level coaching as well.
Yeah.
Even at high level, late in career, there are still some of these fundamental self acceptance
Yeah.
work, awareness
Yeah.
and acceptance that
Yeah.
I think we sometimes assume that people have just had enough of and now they're in the workforce, so we don't have to revisit it. But
Yeah.
it's a lot of work to have that level of confidence to say I don't know when you are in a leadership position, or to say I'm sorry in a meaningful way for having, done something that caused you harm or you pain or whatever.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me know. I've got some work to do. I'm going to do something about it. I would say, I heard, acknowledging, but just knowing how to apologize without centering yourself and trying to convince somebody that their perception is wrong. That's
Yeah.
the hugest missteps is
It
like,
is. It
it's
is.
like, oh, no,
It
no,
is.
no, you misinterpreted
Yeah.
me. It's like at that
Yeah.
point, it doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah.
just listen with that genuine curiosity.
Right.
Um, that's the work that I try to bring in coaching and trying to equip people with emotion skills to handle some of these challenges. Because when we have
Yeah.
a bunch of diverse thinking in a room, if nobody feels safe enough to speak up, then we lose it and
Yeah.
we get frustrated.
And people tend to kind of withdraw from the conversation when there's no there's no safety in the room,
Right.
or when there's one voice, to your point, that's kind of occupying like the actual space, right? So what I typically try to do is I track, like I'm physically tracking, physically in the room or virtually, like who's not speaking, and then I
Hmm.
say, hey, so and so, could you add your voice to the room, right? Because I want, at the end of the day, everybody has something to say that's of value, right? And when you call upon them to add that value or to add that voice to the room, I think it's super helpful. And one other thing I would say, John, is that when I was building my new DEI team, and I didn't notice at first, but once we started working together over the 4 or 5 year period, the one thing that I realized, a lot of the people on my team, they were able to ask for that help, or they were able to say I was wrong, because they were also involved in service of others outside of the corporate workforce, right? So a lot of people on my team were actually volunteering, you know, at at a shelter, or volunteering at a kids event, right? So they had this idea of service, and I believe that was helpful in creating a team of individuals that were open to constructive feedback.
Mm. You didn't say it outright, but when I was asking you about the qualities of leadership,
Yeah.
they were really in line with a concept that I think it's referred to as servant leadership.
Yes.
That
Yep. Yep.
coaching,
Yep.
that
Yep.
coaching, that asking, that trying to understand what motivates folks. I think
Right.
that's really, really powerful. And if more leaders were to adopt that,
Yeah.
and if we were to equip,
Right.
the employees, the people with the skills to understand their brains and what it needs to feel safe, because every one of us is different, you know? And if you've never
Um,
been the only person like you in a room, well, that's a whole set of skills that it takes to feel safe when you look around and you are the only person like you on whatever element of diversity.
right.
And
Yeah.
the more you do that and you realize that, oh, this isn't the end of the world, or oh, this just takes an extra step for me because these folks have already known each other and they're all the same.
Right. Exactly.
My
Exactly.
presence is going to change this. Once you have that awareness, I think it helps get to that meat where we're trying to just get the good stuff out of everybody, even if it challenges the status quo or disrupts the way
Yeah.
things have been
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. And also, it's also helpful if other people in that room recognize that there's some sameness or there's some lack of diversity, right? Because then that they could come to you and say, hey, I recognize that you're the only person with a disability or you're the only person of color in the room, right? And that makes you feel seen, right? And once you feel seen, you're able to add, I think you're able to add your voice in a more meaningful way.
Absolutely, absolutely. The times that I've been the only gay person in a room, and one person has taken the time to just kind of reach out or get that, like it's like, yeah, you remember that, and it feels
Right,
good.
right.
And it works both ways, right? I mean, even
Yeah,
folks in the majority, like that, there's elements. I feel like men in, the older generation, like we make so many assumptions about their privilege, their access, and they're
right,
what aren't we seeing or hearing or
right,
acknowledging? And maybe that might open up those doors a little bit too.
right, right.
Yes,
Yeah,
you can have a lot of things that, a lot of less challenges, less roadblocks that others have, but that
right,
doesn't mean your path to where you are was easy or didn't
right.
require some challenges too. So
Yeah. And then you also mentioned privilege, right? And I think we all have privilege in a different way at different times and different spaces, right? So
yeah,
as a male, I have a privilege, right? Because we're in a male-dominated kind of society. I don't have privilege because I'm also black, right? So your privilege actually morphs based on the
right.
rooms and spaces that you're in, and also recognizing what privileges you have and don't have in those spaces, and helping others that, in room A, I may have the privilege, right? But person B may not. So making sure that you recognize that those privileges actually morph as you kind of move through the world as well.
It requires a lot of self-awareness.
Right, right, right. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think that requires a lot of mental energy. Again,
yeah,
that we, I think, under-equip the
yeah,
workforce
yeah,
to really prioritize and develop
yeah,
those skills.
yeah.
But
And I think to my background coming from the Caribbean, so I went to for example, I went to an all boys Catholic school, right? So, you know, we were steeped in the Christian religion, but also culturally, we celebrated everybody's actual religion, right? I remember celebrating Diwali, for example, which is a Hindu festival, right? And I think having that awareness and having those spaces, it was very, very helpful. I used to tell a lot of people on my executive team, like, get to know somebody that doesn't look like you. And when I say get to know them, that doesn't mean only like, hey, having a one-off conversation with them. Like, go to their homes, have a meal with them, right? Because I feel like food also
mm,
sometimes also translates, these differences that we have, and taking time to really understand like those cultural nuances as well.
I think that is a great tidbit. I
Yeah,
mean, I hear, I grew up in the Catholic religion, so
yeah,
like breaking bread, that whole
right,
concept, but it is
right,
really powerful, when you can either make food or enjoy food with other
right.
people, it really emphasizes that common humanity is that we all need to make and eat food, right? So,
Right, exactly, exactly,
and,
exactly, right, exactly, and that's back to the Maslow's hierarchy, right? Like we need sustenance, right,
yeah,
as part of our existence.
we need to get our needs met.
Yeah,
Hey, I feel like you and I could fill a lot of time. I really love the perspectives that you have brought, and I think that any teams led with your level of clarity, focus, and servant leadership and questioning, kind of getting to the genuine curiosity of what others are experiencing, I think the workplace would be a much better place for everyone. Thanks so
thank
much
you.
for coming on the show today.
All right, John, thanks for having me. Bless. Thank you so much. See you.